this over with.
Hey guys, it's Kathleen here, and I'm going to be reviewing the game that gave me carpal tunnel syndrome. So I'm not gonna sit here and bitch about the fact that we're playing as Raiden. We all know that Raiden is whiny and annoying, or maybe some of you like Raiden, and that's great. But this game isn't necessarily for people that like Metal Gear Solid. You could play this game and not have played any of the Metal Gear Solid games. The plot takes place 4 years after the events of Metal Gear Solid 4. And you're playing as Raiden, who's working at a security force for some guy, and then gets swept up in this terrorism plot and cyborgs and politics and blah blah blah. Honestly, the storyline and the plot is kind of the weak point of the game.
Let's get this over with.
In fact, it's so absurd that it's almost annoying at some points. Let's talk about the gameplay, where it's at. This is what is fun about the game and why it's so addicting. Now, first of all, it takes a little while to get used to the mechanics, but once you get used to it, I highly recommend that you do some of the training on the side so that you can kind of get the feel of how to do some of the combinations in combat. There's just different modes that you need to be aware of when you're playing this game. First of all, there's Blade mode. You can chop anything you want. You can chop someone's limbs off and then watch them run around and try to stomp you to death with their bloody limbs.
Victory is mine. We thank thee, Lord, that in thy mercy... Come on, then. What? How at you? You are indeed brave, Sir Knight, but the fight is mine.
Oh, had enough, eh?
Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left.
Yes, I have.
Look!
Just a flesh wound.
It's absurd. I mean, what other game do you get to jump off of rockets in order to jump on the top of a robot and slice it into little pieces and then throw the little pieces in the air like confetti and then walk away from the explosion like it's no big deal? I want to talk about the other modes. There's the Blade mode, there's Ninja mode where you can run and automatically jump over obstacles, and this is really helpful during boss fights and such when you're trying to avoid enemies attacking you. Now, you also can't block, which was highly frustrating for me until I realized that you can parry. You just hit the button as if you were about to attack them in the direction that they are moving, or in the direction that they are, and then you parry their attack. So that took me a little while to figure out, but I wish that I had just spent more time training before I actually got into combat, because I would have enjoyed it more. But once I got the feel of it, and once I realized that it wasn't just button mashing, but there was a lot of fun in finding different combinations, especially with the different rare weapons that you get, or alternative weapons. You can come up with some really interesting and badass combos. I mean, there was times where I'd be playing and then I'd find a new combination, and it was really exciting. So if you really like fighting games in particular, where you have to use melee skills, this is a great game for you. And I mean, the exciting and addicting feature is definitely the action and the combat. You might find that it's way too easy on easier levels for those of you who are experienced with fighting games, especially melee fighting games. But the hard thing is when you set it on a harder difficulty, which is what I did at the beginning because I heard that the game was easy, I got really stuck when it came to boss fights. Now, these boss fights can be pretty tricky because they all have weaknesses that you have to find and exploit. And if you don't find and exploit those weaknesses, you will get incredibly punished. And you may have to play these boss fights a couple of times in order to find out what their weaknesses are and then finally beat them. There was one boss that I spent about like 30 minutes on or something ridiculous like that, and I finally just pansied out and then decided to play the game again on an easier level just to get past this boss, which was kind of aggravating because when I went back and went on an easier level, it wasn't as challenging for me. But yeah, the boss fights are incredibly challenging and incredibly satisfying. I like that it was challenging. I mean, I don't want to be treated like a kid. This isn't a violent game for adults, and it was very challenging at moments, especially for the boss fight. So if you think this is easy, you definitely need to try playing this on a harder level and challenge yourself. So another downside to the combat was that sometimes the camera angles would start off at really awkward angles that would just get in the way, and it would make it hard to see where your enemies were. Like, it would get stuck in a certain angle where you couldn't see your enemy charging at you, and this would be very frustrating when you're in these highly tense boss fights and combat moments. So that was just one bad thing that I experienced. And another thing is, if you rely on highly developed storyline and characters, this is not the title for you. If you literally have to have great story to play a game, you will be pulling your hair out. You will be sitting there cringing the whole time, and I did cringe a lot because of the corny lines that Raiden said were just so bad.
Stop. George. Yeah. So what are you doing here?
Me? What the rest of you do here? You lose the map of Ninja Hideout, Ninja Man?
But, you know, like I said, I liked the combat, and so it was enough for me to get over the fact that the story was so bad. The great thing is that, you know, I don't think Metal Gear Solid fans will really be insulted by the story. I mean, it is absurd, but it's not, it doesn't really go back and harm any of the integrity of the series. And so I think that, you know, regardless of where you're at in this, like, you'll still be able to play this and enjoy it. And like I said, I would really recommend this game for those of you who are really into melee combat games. Yeah, but I think the most prominent thing to say about this game is that it is over top with everything. Me personally, when I was playing this game, my adrenaline was rushing the entire time. You have these boss fights, you have a lot of boss fights, and they always end in quick time events, which I actually really enjoyed that because, I mean, it was a way for you to engage in the cutscene, and the cutscene at the end of the boss fight, it was relieving that you were finally finished with the boss fight, but the music was so badass. There was not a dull moment other than the speeches that the bosses would give you right before you battled them. But other than that, it was highly action-packed, and the action and the gameplay varied enough that I felt that I was engaged the entire time. Now, the environment was a little bit lackluster. You know, there wasn't that much variation between the environments that we were in, and most of the time, the places that you fought were just really flat in color, and there just wasn't much variation between just some of the things that we saw in the environment. But I was so engaged in the gameplay that it didn't bother me too much. So that's all I thought about Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. If you played the game, let me know what you thought in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to comment, like, and subscribe. And as always, I should go.